His hands were shaking, not from age, but from one more letter that began with the same cold line. "We regret to inform you." Walt Disney stared at the paper. Another studio had said no. He'd already gone bankrupt once. He'd slept in offices, skipped meals, and watched his ideas get stolen. Now he was in a tiny Los Angeles room with barely any money, no real plan, and a head full of impossible cartoons. Most people would have gone home. He decided to draw a mouse. How does a man written off as a failure end up reshaping childhood for almost every kid on Earth? And what did it really cost him to turn pain, rejection, and fear into fantasy? This is the Untold Spirit of Walt Disney, and you're watching The Untold Spirit. To understand the dreamer, we have to start with the boy. Walt Disney grew up in the early 1900s in a world that felt tough and unforgiving. His family never had much money. His father believed in hard work, not daydreams. So Walt worked. Paper routes in the freezing dark, chores before and after school, long days, little rest. But there was one place he escaped: a piece of paper, a pencil, a few lines that turned into a character. Picture this: a skinny kid up late by a dim light, sketching faces while the rest of the house sleeps. For that boy, drawing wasn't a hobby, it was oxygen. As Walt got older, movies were changing the world. Silent films, black and white comedies, new animation tricks. He was fascinated. Cartoons weren't respected. They were little throwaway shorts before the real movie. But he saw something bigger. He started small in Kansas City. No Hollywood glamour, just cheap offices, secondhand equipment, and a handful of young artists who believed in him. They worked long hours, barely got paid, and chased an idea that almost no one took seriously. Cartoons with heart. Cartoons that made you feel something. For a moment, it looked like things might work. He got a small series going, some attention, a little money, and then the real world pushed back. The first big blow came fast. Walt had created a character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald was charming, funny, and starting to become popular. He traveled to meet with his distributor, expecting a raise, maybe a better deal. Instead, he walked into a trap. The distributor had secretly hired away most of his animators. They had taken Oswald, too. The contract gave the character to the distributor, not to Walt. In a single meeting, he lost almost everything: his team, his main character, and his income. He was in his 20s, already bankrupt once. Now, again, he was being told he didn't own his own work. On the long train ride back, he had a choice. He could accept that the big players ran the show. He could get a stable job, stop chasing this foolish idea that cartoons mattered. Or he could risk everything again, with absolutely no guarantee that it would be different this time. Somewhere on that journey, hurt and anger turned into something else. He decided that no one would own his dreams again. He started sketching new ideas. Rabbits were out. What about a cat? A dog? Then a small, simple shape. Round ears, button nose, a friendly grin. A mouse. To the business world, it sounded ridiculous. A tiny startup studio, a talking mouse, silent films at a time when sound was just beginning. Walt's own wife reportedly said, "A mouse?" like she wasn't sure this was the best plan. But Walt felt something. This new character, later called Mickey, wasn't just a cartoon. He was scrappy, cheerful against all odds, the kind of character who laughs even as everything falls apart. In a way, he was Walt himself. Still, belief didn't pay the bills. The studio struggled. Distributors weren't convinced. Animation was expensive. Walt pushed his team hard. Too hard, some would later say. Long nights, endless redraws, experiments no one was paying for yet. Inside, there was a constant war. Fear of failing again, shame from the earlier bankruptcy, responsibility for the young artists who had followed him. Do you slow down and protect what little you have, or do you gamble everything on one more crazy idea? He wanted not just movement, but music, personality, soul. So he bet on something new, a fully synchronized sound cartoon, at a time when even live-action filmmakers were still struggling with sound. If it failed, his studio might collapse. He chose to do it anyway. The result was a short film about a mischievous mouse on a steamboat, Steamboat Willie. When it premiered in a New York theater, the audience didn't know they were about to see history. The cartoon began. For the first time, every whistle, every squeak, every musical note lined up perfectly with the animation. People laughed, they clapped. They weren't just watching drawings, they were watching a little character come alive. That night was a turning point. The same man who had been told, "You own nothing," now owned the most famous cartoon in the world. But success didn't mean peace. The more the studio grew, the more pressure Walt felt. He pushed into color when others stayed in black and white. He invested in new technology, new storytelling, new music. Each step meant more money on the line, more nights without sleep, more tension with his own staff. Then came his biggest gamble yet, a full-length animated movie. A cartoon feature sounded like a joke. People in the industry called it Disney's folly. Who would sit in a theater for more than an hour watching drawings? They said audiences' eyes would hurt, that no one would care. Walt bet the company and his reputation that they were wrong. The project nearly broke him. He borrowed heavily. He remortgaged. There were times when they ran out of money mid-production, and he had to beg for more just to keep going. But he believed in the story. A young girl lost in the woods, tempted, frightened, but ultimately saved by love and courage. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. When it finally premiered, people didn't laugh at the idea of a feature-length cartoon. They cried. They cheered. Some walked out of the theater stunned, like they had just seen a dream on screen. The movie became a massive success. It changed the future of animation and secured Disney's place in Hollywood. Yet even then, the cost was real. Stress took a toll on his health, relationships with some employees fractured. He was always chasing the next dream. Disneyland, television, more films, rarely stopping to rest. Behind the magic, there was a man who had lived with failure so long that he never quite trusted success. We know the castle. We know the mouse. We know the fireworks, the songs, the logo that appears before so many movies. What we don't always see is the boy freezing on his paper route, the young man riding a train home believing his career is over, the creator who had his work stolen, his studio gutted, his dreams dismissed as childish nonsense. Walt Disney's story isn't just about imagination. It's about what you do when your imagination is laughed at, when people in power tell you that your ideas don't belong to you, when the world says, "Be realistic," and your heart says, "What if I'm not?" His spirit was not pure fairy tale. It was stubborn, imperfect, sometimes harsh, but underneath it all was a refusal to let failure be the final word. Why is this side of his story often overlooked? Because we like our legends polished. We like to believe that geniuses were always destined for greatness, not broke, scared, and sitting on a train with everything falling apart. Yet it's exactly those moments that make his legacy powerful. The magic of Disney isn't just in flying elephants and talking mice. It's in the idea that a life filled with rejection and risk can still light up the dark for millions of strangers. That's the untold spirit here. Failure didn't end his story. It shaped it. It forced him to own his dreams, protect his characters, and keep pushing the limits of what stories could do. So the next time you see that little mouse, remember the man who drew him when his world was collapsing. Remember that some of the brightest fantasies come from the deepest moments of doubt. If you want more hidden stories of courage, conflict, and the human spirit, subscribe to the Untold Spirit and join us for the next Untold Journey.